Welcome to Navigating Complex Divorce and Parenting Issues with attorney Melanie Walls.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Navigating Complex Divorce and Parenting Issues with attorney Melanie Walls. Melanie is an OSBA certified specialist in family relations law who works with clients on complex financial matters, including cases where income, assets, or financial activity may not be fully transparent at the outset. I'm Sean O'Connor, and today Melanie and I are looking at how undisclosed assets are identified in divorce cases and what signs tend to raise concern. How those issues are addressed as the case moves forward also comes into play, of course. Melanie, good to see you.
Good to see you, Sean.
You've been practicing, 20 years?
28 years.
28 years.
Wow.
Okay, so I know when you say it out loud, it's like, oh, wow. So, you've got the experience. I'm curious, from what you've seen, what usually raises concern that assets or income may not be fully disclosed in a divorce case? What have you seen?
Most of the time you see it in their lifestyle. You'll have someone fill out a financial affidavit saying that they make a certain amount of money, or they have a certain vehicle. And then lo and behold, one of our best tools in this practice area is social media. You find out so much on social media that people don't realize you're going to find out. So, for example, you may have shut down your social media page, but guess what? Your friends didn't, and your spouse is still social media friends with your friends. So you're telling the court in an affidavit that you drive a Toyota pickup truck, and you're seen all over social media driving a Lamborghini or a Porsche, or you're telling the court that you make a certain amount of money and you can't pay support because you're struggling to pay the bills and your income is limited. And then you're seen on social media in Italy or Spain, or on your third cruise of the year. It sounds sort of cliche or corny to say, but I mean, people love social media, and so do divorce attorneys. Because it really helps us out sometimes.
I hear about it in other contexts too. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, in terms of communication, that you've had with people that, nothing to do with hiding assets necessarily, but yeah, social media, some modern day constant for sure. So you're doing the sleuthing, so to speak. You've identified some concerns about the potential for a lack of transparency, shall we say. What are the first steps taken to begin building a more accurate, complete financial picture?
In Ohio, most courts have what we call a mandatory disclosure order. So when someone files a complaint for divorce, there's a list of documents the court says that you must exchange with the other party: deeds to real estate, tax returns for the last 3 years, current income documents, current bank statements, current credit card statements. All of that must be exchanged. But that's just really an outline of the financial picture. What you want to do is issue discovery to the other side, which is, interrogatories and requests for production of documents. Provide your last 3 years of, your Venmo, your PayPal, your Zelle, your bank statements, your credit card statements. You want to do a deeper dive into the finances. And then sometimes you will have a client say, I know he has other bank accounts. I know this isn't everything. Then at that point, once you've done discovery, your next step would be to issue subpoenas. If you know where he banks, issue a subpoena to that bank for any and all bank records under that particular social security number. Or if a spouse thinks the other spouse is, hiding money somewhere, issue a subpoena to each of the banks near where they work or where they reside to try and find assets that that spouse did not disclose. So, you start with the tools that the court provides you, and then ultimately, you may just have to issue subpoenas just to see if there's anything else out there.
Well, you mentioned, a spouse tipping you off or just expressing uh, the view that there's other bank accounts out there. Are there other types of inconsistencies that you see that stand out as indicators that, something may be amiss?
Once you do the financial disclosure and you have bank statements and you have credit card statements, you need to take a detailed look at those documents. For example, a checking account where you see a significant amount of cash withdrawals, $400 a week or something along those lines. I mean, that's a red flag. Where's that money going? Why are they taking cash out? Is
Mhm.
this, historically how they did their finances during the marriage? Or is this something that just started within the last year, within the last 6 months? You want to look at, discrepancies between, what they're reporting as their income and what they're actually spending. I mean, people get caught that way a lot more times than you'd think when they tell the court in an affidavit, I make X, but yet when you look at their credit card payments and their bank deposits, it's significantly more than what they stated as their income. So that's where some common inconsistencies come in, and where people get caught not being fully transparent with the other side or with the court.
I mean, I think oftentimes complexity or discovery is necessary just around business ownership or when, someone's in a self-employment situation and, the financial picture is just a little bit more nuanced. How do those situations affect the ability to identify missing or understated income?
Businesses are my favorite part of the divorce process. I have a bachelor's degree in business management, and I love getting businesses in a divorce. You look at a lot of different things. You have to look at the business credit card. You have to look at the business bank accounts. You look at the business tax returns. You have to look
Hmm.
at all of that. You look at, how vehicles are titled. Are they, titled the boat in Florida, to the family owned business? What business needs a boat in Florida? um, Credit cards, are they running all of their vacations on the business credit card? What, it's pretty prevalent for business owners to run a great deal of personal expenses through their business.
Hmm.
They may not get caught by the IRS, but guess what? They're going to get caught by their spouse's divorce attorney, because
Hmm.
all of those expenses are income to that spouse. So it's pretty important to really do a deep dive into the financials, and even more so when it's a complex business. You don't want to spend attorney time going through, years of credit card statements and bank statements. You want to hire your expert to do a forensic examination of those financials and issue you a report. And that
Hmm.
report will say, here are all the expenses that we deem business, and here are all the expenses that we deem personal, and this spouse's earnings are actually X, when that spouse was giving themselves, let's say, a W-2 for 300,000 a year. And if you don't look into the financials and you use that W-2 of 300,000 a year to calculate support, you've got a problem when your expert comes back and says, well, yes, they issued a W-2 for 300,000, but guess what? When we add in all these personal expenses, their income is actually 500,000 a year. So, I mean, it's extremely important in more complex cases to bring in your expert to do those types of analytical reports.
Got it. Got it. What about situations where, and I think we've all heard of this or seen the movie, assets get, transferred or moved or retitled, obviously to potentially hide them, I'm guessing. How are those transactions analyzed within the broader timeline of the case?
The court's only going to go back so far. Courts
Mm.
don't like to go back behind the date of the filing of the complaint. But if you've got a spouse who, 6 months before they filed for divorce, they transferred, the Lamborghini to their brother, and, they transferred the yacht to their father. I mean, obviously, that's not an arm's length transaction, and the court is going to undo that. But if you have a spouse that, for example, knows they want to terminate their marriage and says, you know what, we've got a lot of debt here. I'm going to sell the boat, and pay off all these credit cards. That's not financial misconduct. That's not trying to hide an asset. So the court's going to look at, the timing of the transfer, the nature of the transfer. Was it an arm's length transaction, or did you know, title the boat to your buddy? And they're also going to look at, if it was a sale, where did those funds go? Um, you know, is there a tracing of those funds? Did the funds go back into the joint marital account? Did the funds go to pay off marital debt? Or are all the funds missing and the spouse can't account for them? Then obviously that would be suspect to the court.
If it does churn out, the scenario runs where, the assets aren't fully disclosed. How does that affect the way the case is handled or resolved?
Ohio has a statute that specifically addresses, a failure to disclose all of your marital assets, and there can be penalties for that after your case is over and it's discovered, 6 months after your divorce, that you had, an account that you didn't disclose. You can be liable to your spouse for 3 times that amount. Now, if it happens during the course of a case, for example, where we find out a spouse who's from another country has bank accounts in that country that they didn't disclose, or, they've been sending money to their dad in Italy, for the last 6 months, to the tune of, tens of thousands of dollars, and they didn't disclose this account, and it comes out at trial or shortly before trial. The last thing you want to do is lose credibility with the court. The last thing you want your client to do is to make the court mad. Um, you can't undo that damage. You can't unring that bell. So you cannot stress enough to your client. It's going to be discovered sooner or later. So be transparent. There is nothing to be gained by trying to hide something, because it's not a good look when you're on that witness stand and you get caught.
Well, and like you said, you might be able to fool the IRS, but they're looking at, millions and millions of situations, and a good divorce attorney is laser focused on on one particular set of accounts, and so it makes sense that people get discovered more often than you'd think. I was going to close with this idea or the question around, what is it? What do you tell your clients that helps ensure that financial disclosures are thorough and accurate from the outset? You just mentioned, well, there's serious fines and credibility, all sorts of ramifications. Are there a couple of things that you do or advise your clients specifically that helps things go right from the outset?
When I have a client come in for an initial consultation and they have not yet filed for divorce, the other spouse has not yet filed for divorce, I encourage them to educate themselves about the finances of their marriage. How are bills paid? Where do you bank? Where does your spouse bank? What credit cards do you have? Do you have a Chase? Do you have an American Express? Um, know your finances, do your homework, make sure you have an understanding. Look at your tax returns. If you have an accountant, schedule a meeting with your accountant. Have your accountant explain the family, finances to you. Use your CPA to educate yourself. I think the more you know, the better off you are. Sadly, you do see people come through the door that have let their spouse control every aspect of the finances during their marriage. And they don't know what retirement accounts they have. They don't know where they bank. They know that they have an American Express and a Chase card, but they have no idea how many credit cards their spouse has. They just don't know anything about the family finances. And
Yeah.
in that case, you can't rely on your client. You have to rely on the tools of the legal process, and that's where the court's mandatory disclosure, the interrogatories, requests for production of documents, requests for admissions, depositions, all your discovery tools come into place. And sometimes when you're grasping at straws, you may issue subpoenas to various places just to see if there's anything out there.
Yeah. I hear you. Well, that's yeah. I mean, those scenarios aren't that surprising, I guess. Sometimes there's just a division of labor on some of that stuff, and it's like, yeah, I didn't concern myself with the money side of things, but uh, that sounds like good advice. Obviously, if you're heading towards a divorce, start to do some homework. Well, Melanie, as always, great talking with you.
You too, Sean.
I'll talk to you again. I'll talk to you again soon, I'm sure. That wraps up today's episode of Navigating Complex Divorce and Parenting Issues with attorney Melanie Walls. If you want to learn more about Melanie's practice or request a consultation, visit her website, melaniewallslaw.com. I'm Sean O'Connor. Thanks for listening, and please, leave a review, share a link of the episode with someone who you think might benefit from it, and we appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.